If you're singing people Irish music, Irish rhythm music.
Hi, I'm Shona. I'm a storyteller from Ayr. This is Teresa, aka my bubble, my quarantine. We're here in our local pub, and it doesn't look like it normally looks, and it doesn't sound like it normally sounds because of the virus that must not be named, and the reason that I'm recording a story rather than telling it to you face to face. Let's get cracking. I've got a story I think you're going to love. I've just found it, and it's perfect for Tamfest. It is a little gruesome, so if you've got little ones, this might not be for them, unless they're made of strong stuff. They're from Ayr. They can handle it. The story starts with a funeral. And it is a good funeral, which sounds like a contradiction, that you can have a good funeral, but you can. You can have a good funeral that's done well, that does what it needs to do. A funeral that's full of people chatting, full of reconnection, full of laughter and memories. Funerals can be done well, and this funeral was done so well that it started at 11 AM and it wasn't finished by midnight, when the whole town of Ayr had gathered in a pub. They were in, and they were chatting, and they were dancing, and they were joking, and they were reminiscing about times gone by. Now, in this pub is Tam, our friend Tam, but at this point he was a young man. He was a sexy man. He was a good looking guy. He'd just finished a harvest. He was bronzed from the sun. He'd been lifting his hay bales and getting his gains. And as such, all of the aunties of the town were saying, Tam, I think it's about time you found yourself a wife, don't you think? Don't you think it's time that you settle down, that you have some babies, that you do the things you're meant to do, that society tells you is all that matters? Don't you think that's time, Tam? Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? And he was like, yeah, cool, okay, I'll find a woman. I'll find a woman who can, I'll set them a task. I'll set them a task, and if this woman can do it, then they'll be ready for me, and they'll be right for me. He was talking nonsense. He said, I had a stick at the funeral. It was a beautiful blackthorn stick. I was going to whittle it, ladies. I was going to whittle my stick into a love spoon, which I would give to the woman I would marry. The thing is, I think I dropped my stick at the funeral. I think it fell maybe into the grave of the person that we buried. So whoever can go and get my stick, bring it back to me, I'll marry them. And one by one, the very dignified young women of Ayrshire, they tossed their hair and they said, Tam, no, on your way, be gone with the devil. I wouldn't go into no graveyard at Halloween on a new moon with a man that's just been buried for any man's stick. Not even your black hawthorn stick, whatever that is. And then one young lassie sitting in the corner, I didn't know that was going to. She piped up and she said, I'll get your stick, Tam. I'll get it. That man's dead. He had a good send-off. He has nothing left in this world. He'd lived a good life. He was loved. He was respected. He's gone. I'll get your stick. There's nothing to be scared of. And so as the pub shut and people went back to their homes, our Kate, she headed to the graveyard. Now I've got a disclaimer here. We are going to meet the person that died. We are going to meet a dead man. And the beauty of storytelling is that the story might come out of my mouth, but it exists in your imaginations. So you can picture this however you want. If you're a bit younger, I would encourage you to imagine those skeletons from Coco Disney Pixar vibes. You know, a jingle jangle happy skeleton man, the kind of Halloween costumes that you wear. You imagine that. If you're a bit older, if you're a bit more attuned to the horror genre, you can imagine what you like. So anyway, Kate, she arrives at the graveyard and she's on her hands and knees looking for this stick, and she hears a voice. Let me out! Are you scared? Let me out! And if you hear a man calling from beneath the earth, calling to be let out, you blooming well let them out. And so she scrabbled at the earth and she dug up the ground until she reached the coffin, and she prized that open, and there he was, the loved man that had gone, saying, "Oh, thank you, young Kate, thank you for letting me out." And she said, "Man, we buried you today. I thought you were happy when you died. I thought you had nothing left in this earth. And I thought you were respected and loved. What more could you want?" And he said, I was happy, but I was also hungry when I died. And I want another meal. Kate, you're going to get me another meal. I'm really starving. And she said, "You can't say no to a dead man." And also she was scared. Yeah, that you would be. And she said, "Okay, but how?" And he climbed out the grave and he said, "Take me on your back, take me to somewhere with food." And she said, "Okay, do I do?" And so he climbed on her back, and she walked out of the graveyard with a dead man on her back. And the dead man's whispering, "Thank you, Kate, I really appreciate what you're doing for me here, I'm starving." And she's saying, "No problem. And the first house that, you can do the sound effects, and the first house that they passed was Tam's house. He was asleep in his bedroom, bachelor pad, and he said, "In there, there's food in there." And so they go into the kitchen, and she puts him down at the table, and he says, "Get me some food." And it's a bachelor pad, so there's nothing, and it's half a pack of oatmeal with porridge oats. "That's fine, make me some porridge oats." And she looks around, "But there's no milk, man, there's no milk." "That's fine, get me some water." And she looks around, "But there's no water. There's no water, man. I'm so sorry, I can't feed you. There's nothing here. I don't know what this man is living off of. He needs a wife or to just get a hold of himself." "No problem." And the thing is that as a dead man, the lines between good and bad and life and death have evaporated. And so he didn't think twice, and he picked up a knife from the sideboard, and he picked up a bowl, and he dragged himself into the room where Tam was sleeping. And let's just say that he came back with a bowl of liquid, which he gave to the crying Kate. And Kate was terrified now, so she did what the dead man wanted, and she poured it into the oatmeal, and she stirred it, and she made a cake. "One bowl for me and one bowl for you." And she spooned this oatmeal gunk into each bowl, and he ate it up. The dead man is eating the oatmeal with the blood of Tam. And Kate, who has been watched by the dead man, is pretending to eat, but secretly she's dropping that oatmeal gunk into the penny pocket. And nothing is said, and the weirdness and the death is expanding until both bowls are finished. And the dead man says, "Right, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to move on." And Kate says, "Wait, dead man, I'm so glad that you are fulfilled, but it's a shame that your fulfillment had to come at such a cost. Is there anything we can do?" And the dead man said, "You're right, that was a shame. There is something that could be done. If we had spooned a bit of this oatmeal into the mouth of Tam, he would survive. But we've both finished our bowls now, so you win some, you lose some. Let's get going." And Kate has to take the dead man on her back again, and she leaves the house, and she leaves Tam in whatever state he's in, and they head back to the graveyard. And meanwhile, the dead man's whispering in her ear, saying, "Thank you, lassie, thank you. You have given the final wish to the dead man, and I will always appreciate that. And for your kindness, I'll tell you a secret. A year ago, I buried a bag of gold down at Mungo's well, where it said Mungo's mother hanged herself. I buried a bag of gold, and you can have that because you have been so kind tonight." And she said, "Thank you." And she lays him on the ground, and she covers him up until he says, "Thanks, that's enough now. You've covered me, you've done your job. I'll be away. And she knows he has gone properly this time. The next morning, Kate's mother wakes her gently saying, "Darling, I've got got some dreadful news. Your Tam, he was in the night, something happened and he's dead. And Kate, her eyes spring open and she says, well, what do you want me to do about that? I have nothing to do with that. Why even tell me anything? No, darling, I'm just telling you because I'd always had hopes that you and he would. But I'm so sorry to tell you, his body lies in the kirk and his dad is standing vigil. And if you want to see him one last time, you need to go now. And so she does. She cleans herself off and she has her penny with the oatmeal gunk inside it. And she braids her hair beautifully. She washes her face and she puts flowers behind her ear. She goes to the church. And indeed, Tam's dad is standing vigil when she says, Mr. O'Shanter, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, truly, for what happened to your son. If there was anything I could do, if I could bring him back, I would gladly marry your son. He's a great man. And the dad, grief-stricken, looks at this young lassie and sees the pain and the earnestness in her eyes, and he says, truly, lassie, if you could bring him back, I would be glad if you married. And she nods and she leans over the casket and she sees beautiful Tam lying there, fresh from the harvest. And as if to give him a final kiss on the forehead, she spoons a bit of that oatmeal gunk into his mouth. And life flushes back to his cheeks and his eyes bat open and he sees her, the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. And they were married. And after a year, she tells him the story of that night. And she produces a bag of gold that she dug up from near Mungo's well. And they do have babies because that's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? Isn't it? And for a while, at least, they were very happy. And that's the end of that.